Greetings one and all, at last. And in Darug, the Sydney language, Warumi, which means good to see you. I begin by acknowledging the First Nations of the country we now call Australia and the custodianship of the land over tens of thousands of years. And may we listen to God's wisdom, which the original inhabitants of this continent have been cherishing through the eons. You know me, I'm Dor Kostake. I am chairing the Theology Research Network on behalf of the Sydney College of Divinity, but I also am the ISCAS Research Director. It's my pleasure to host the second TRN ISCAS seminar this year on the topic Religiously Human in a Techno-Scientific World, and to introduce today's speakers and respondent. But before that, I invite the Reverend Dr. Chris Mulherrin, ISCAS CEO, to greet us on behalf of ISCAS and to pray for the seminar. Chris?
Sure. Thank you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, who formed the intricate patterns of nature and bestowed upon us the gift of scientific inquiry, we gather in your name to seek a deeper understanding of your creation. As we consider the impact of technology and the technocratic paradigm, guide our discussions with wisdom. Help us discern the proper place of technology within your good creation. May we see beyond mere power or efficiency to embrace a vision for technology that respects our world and serves your purposes of justice and love. In the name of Christ, the reconciler of all things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Chris. And it's also my pleasure to invite Professor Constantine Campbell, the SCD's Research Director, to salute us and share some thoughts about the Theology Research Network. Con, would you like to share something with us, some thoughts?
Sure, thanks, Doru. I don't want to take up too much time since we're off to a bit of a slow start, but greetings, everyone, and on behalf of Sydney College of Divinity Graduate Research School, I'm pleased to be with you. I don't have a scientific or technological background, but I'm very interested in the intersection between science and technology and theology, and I've been in conversation with Doru about developing research at the SCD along these kinds of lines. So I see this network as being very fruitful and significant as we move further into the 21st century. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to listening today and being more involved in the future.
Thank you very much, Con. And let me briefly introduce today's speaker, Robert Gascoigne, who is an emeritus professor of the School of Theology at Australian Catholic University. He holds degrees in history, political philosophy, and theology, and is particularly interested in the social political dimensions of Christian ethics. Robert is a past president of the Australian Catholic Theological Association and was Australian representative on the Asian Regional Committee of the Catholic Theological Ethics in the World Church Network until 2018. He authored a number of books on Christian faith and contemporary society, including The Public Forum and Christian Ethics, Freedom and Purpose, An Introduction to Christian Ethics, and The Church and Secularity, Two Stories of Liberal Society. The response to Robert's paper will be given by Anne Lanyon. Anne is a Sydney-based community educator. After 20 years with the Columbans and 50 years a teacher, she retired as Deputy Director of the Columban Mission Institute and coordinator of its Center for Peace, Ecology, and Justice late in 2017. She is currently the volunteer coordinator of the Faith Ecology Network and the St Anthony's Kieran's Creek Land Care Group in Sydney. She is a member of the Laudato Si New South Wales network and the local bush carer near her home. She is passionate about education for a better world and is involved in a variety of peace, ecology, and justice groups, including on the board of Jubilee Australia Research Centre. Now, let's turn to Robert's presentation, Pope Francis's Critique of the Technocratic Paradigm. The paper will run for about 3 minutes, after which we'll listen to Anne's comments for about 10 minutes. Before we do so, however, please make sure you have your microphone switched off for the duration of the presentations. Equally important, if some of you do not wish to have their faces appear in the video recording and the print screen shots, please keep your cameras off. Robert, the floor is yours.
In his encyclical Laudato Si, 2015, and recently in the apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum, issued on the feast of St Francis of Assisi, October the 4th, 2023, Pope Francis has responded with evangelical fervour to the climate crisis. Influenced by his study of the theologian Romano Guardini, Francis judges the technocratic paradigm to be a key cause of this crisis. It is a certain way of understanding human life and activity that has gone awry, to the serious detriment of the world around us. Deep down, it consists in thinking as if reality, goodness, and truth automatically flow from technological and economic power as such. As a logical consequence, it then becomes easy to accept the idea of infinite or unlimited growth, which proves so attractive to economists, financiers, and experts in technology. While emphasizing that science and technology are wonderful products of a God-given human creativity, Francis makes a plea for guiding humanity's technological powers by respect for creation. As he says, a pilgrimage of reconciliation with the world that is our home. This paper will discuss Francis's critique of the technocratic paradigm and consider how it can be countered by a discernment of technology's role and purpose in a Christian ethical perspective. After his term as provincial of the Jesuits in Argentina, Jorge Bergoglio, the future Pope Francis, was offered the opportunity of studying for a doctoral thesis in Germany on the thought of Romano Guardini. He was not to complete the thesis and lived in Germany only from May to December 1986. But Guardini's thought has remained a key influence, as is particularly evident in Laudato Si. Because of the significance of Guardini's ideas for Francis, first half of this paper will provide some background on Guardini and a review of his key works relating to these issues. I will then consider the concept of the technocratic paradigm as it is discussed in Laudato Si and Laudate Deum, and also its implications for artificial intelligence, considered in Francis's recent World Day of Peace message, 1st of January 2024. Artificial Intelligence and Peace. I will conclude by considering Francis's proposals for resisting the technocratic paradigm through respect and care for creation. Romano Guardini was a key precursor of the Second Vatican Council. His Italian parents moved to Mainz, Germany, when he was an infant, and he spent virtually all his life in Germany. After academic studies and ordination to the priesthood, Guardini was appointed in 1923 to the chair of Philosophy of Religion and Catholic Weltanschauung, or worldview, in Berlin. This position was created at the behest of the Catholic Centre Party, the Zentrum, one of the principal democratic parties in the Weimar Republic, since there was no chair of Catholic theology in Berlin. By March 1933, the Nazi Party had dictatorial powers in Germany, and Guardini was dismissed from the chair by the Nazi government in 1939. In his autobiographical reflections of 1945, Guardini recalled that the Nazi Minister of Culture said to him, "When the state itself has a worldview, there is no room at the University of Berlin for an academic chair on the Catholic worldview." No discussion of this presupposition was possible. I could do nothing other than nod. After the war, Guardini occupied a chair of Philosophy of Religion and Christian Weltanschauung in Tübingen from 1945 to 1948, and in Munich from 1948 to 1963, where he was succeeded by Karl Rahner, who had first met Guardini in 1920, when Guardini was pastor to the German Catholic Reform youth movement. Guardini's first reflections on technology and power were in his Letters from Lake Como, Explorations in Technology and the Human Race. In his first letters, Guardini bemoaned the fact that modern industrial technology was implanting itself in Italy, which was thus becoming more like Northern Europe. I quote, as on the screen, "Look, what has already taken place in the north, I saw beginning here. I saw machines invading the land that had previously been the home of culture. I saw death overtaking a life of infinite beauty, and I felt that this was not just an external loss that we could accept and remain who we were, instead a life of supreme value that can arise only in the world that we have long since lost, was beginning to perish here, as well as in the north. All at once then, on the singing lines of a small town, I saw the great box of a factory." Guardini's revulsion against industrial technology was accompanied by a conviction that earlier technology, such as sailing ships, were products of human ingenuity that were in organic harmony with nature. Yet he soon had to acknowledge how his romantic perspectives did not address the human needs of the local population, who responded to him, quote, "But the destruction that accompanied this process was seen as necessary. Indeed, bitterness entered in. Our country has to remain poor and our people emigrate so that you may fulfill your romantic needs here. I had to admit this." In his ninth and final letter, after much wrestling with the challenge of modern technology and its effects, Guardini argued that it was, quote, "Christianity that has made possible science and technology and all that results from them. Only those who had been influenced by the immediacy of the redeemed soul to God and the dignity of the regenerate, so that they were aware of being different from the world around them, could have broken free from the tie to nature in the way that this has been done in the age of technology. The people of antiquity would have been afraid of hybris here," end quote. Yet the forces of technology have fallen victim to the demonism of number and machine and the will for domination. He concludes that what we need is not less technology, but more. Or more accurately, we need stronger, more considered, more human technology. Guardini returned to the question of technology and power in two key works shortly after the end of World War II. Das Ende der Neuzeit, The End of the Modern World, and Die Macht Versuch einer Wegweisung, Power and Responsibility. In The End of the Modern World, he argued that technology has grown from modern science, and technology is a concentration of processes which allow man to posit in conformity with his own desires. This is fundamentally changed in contrast to a romantic response to nature. The technological mind sees nature as an insensate order, as a cold body of facts, as a mere given, as an object of utility, as raw material to be hammered into useful shape. The key element in technology is neither profit nor human well-being, but rather power is its motive, the lordship of all. The man seizes hold of the naked elements of both nature and human nature. This gives rise to immense possibilities for both creation and destruction, especially for the destruction of humanity itself. It also gives rise to a kind of religious emotion stemming from a sense of danger for humanity and the earth. Humanity's emotion grows out of the realization that he approaches his ultimate decision, that he must face it with responsibility, with resolution, and with bravery. Evil is not inevitable, even though our age is troubled to its very depths by an awareness of the reality of the deliberate destructiveness in the human spirit. Human power has grown greatly, but not the responsibility and consciousness for exercising it well. It can therefore become open to the demonic, a term that Guardini uses in the literal sense. The new technological culture is marked by the danger of newly acquired powers. Humanity has mastered nature to a great degree, but is not in control of its own native powers. Man today holds power over things, but we can assert confidently that he does not yet have power over his own power. In the post-World War II world, after the deployment of the atomic bomb, humanity lives in a new era of history, and the restraint and proper use of power must be central to human culture, especially through humanity conquering and humbling itself. And these thoughts of Guardini were further intensified when President Truman announced the development of a far more powerful bomb, that is the hydrogen bomb, in January 1950. Guardini emphasized that he was not seeking to predict the end of human history, but rather that humanity is now in the final age in the sense that it can now destroy itself. With these words, I proclaim no facile apocalyptic. No man has the right to say the end is here, for Christ himself has declared that only the Father knows the day and the hour. If we speak here of the nearness of the end, we do not mean nearness in the sense of time, but nearness as it pertains to the essence of the end. For in essence, man's existence is now nearing an absolute decision. Each and every consequence of that decision bears within it the greatest potentiality and the most extreme danger. In Power and Responsibility, Guardini affirms that there is no such thing as power that in and of itself is valuable or significant. Power receives its character only when someone becomes aware of it, determines its position to work. This means that someone must answer for it. There is always responsibility attached to power. Despite what he saw as a contemporary trend to de-link power and responsibility, to divorce power from the person and to place its exercise on the level of natural forces, Guardini emphasized that responsibility cannot be destroyed. It can only be corrupted. A corruption which, becoming guilt, works itself out in destruction. In itself, power is neither good nor evil. Its quality is determined by him who wields it. In the hands of misguided will, power acquires characteristics which ultimately only revelation is in a position to interpret. It becomes demonic. Guardini's theological analysis of power focuses on the opening chapters of Genesis, since Revelation's testimony is essential to any deeper understanding of power. And I quote as on the screen, "Man's natural godlikeness consists in this capacity for power, in his ability to use it and his resultant lordship. Herein lies the essential vocation and worth of human existence." Scripture's answer to the question, where does the ontological nature of power come from? Man cannot be human and, as a kind of addition to his humanity, exercise or fail to exercise power. The exercise of power is essential to his humanity. Only when these facts have been accepted does the phenomenon of power receive its full weight, its greatness, as well as its earnestness, which is grounded in responsibility. If human power and the lordship which stems from it are rooted in man's likeness to God, then power is not man's in his own right, autonomously, but only as a loan in fief. Man is Lord by the grace of God, and he must exercise his dominion responsibly, for he is answerable for it to him who is Lord by essence. Thus sovereignty becomes obedience, service. Exercising sovereignty as service, the human person remains the image of God. not demanding identity with the Creator. This service means, first of all, that sovereignty is to be exercised with respect for the truth of things, to develop nature on the human level as history and culture, to complete the world of God as a free human world in accordance with God's will. Yet because of the fall, the order in which that sovereignty had meaning, as service answerable to him who is sovereign by essence, is destroyed. Now disorder reigns. In all epochs, the human person is in a state of decline and needing redemption. I quote, "If in the present crisis the dangers of the negative choice of injustice and destruction seem greater than ever before, only the intensity of those dangers is new, nothing essential. For these have always existed in man, not exclusively in the man of the future. All we can do is accept the present situation and, strengthened by the purest powers of the mind and of grace, overcome them from within." Despite living in the end time of human power, Guardini believes in the possibility of a positive solution, since human freedom has a real chance to swing history in a happier direction. The human person must go forward to truth in metanoia, must be answerable, a genuine ruler of the world, doing the right, so that every person can exercise responsibility, each in his or her own place, and help to shape the world. We hope for a new humanity, which will have power not only over nature, but also over his own powers. In other words, he will understand how to subordinate power to the true meaning of human life and works. He will be the genuine regent, who alone can save our age from going down in violence and chaos. This new humanity knows that the world is in the hands of freedom. Hence, he feels responsibility for tomorrow's kind of freedom. And love, his love of the world, is very special, deepened by the precariousness, vulnerability, helplessness of his beloved. For Guardini, humility is the key to the Christian message of salvation. It is indeed Christianity's inmost secret, inspired by the invocation of Christ's humility in Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 to 8. All creaturely humility has its origin in the act in which the Son of God became man. Once and forever, through Christ's obedience, God's answer to the question of power is given, not privately, but publicly, historically, visible to all. Guardini's influence on Laudato Si. In Laudato Si, Francis emphasizes that science and technology are wonderful products of a God-given human creativity, and expresses gratitude and appreciation for all that various fields of science and technology, including medicine, engineering, and communications, have done to remedy countless evils which used to harm and limit human beings. He also reflects on the harm done by technology and the need for it to be restrained by ethical wisdom, drawing on Guardini's insights, in particular from The End of the Modern World, which is cited 8 times, principally in chapter 3, The Human Roots of the Ecological Crisis, and also in chapter 6, Ecological Education and Spirituality. What are the key insights Francis draws from The End of the Modern World? Fundamentally, that an increase in power is not necessarily progress, since our immense technological development has not been accompanied by development in human responsibility, values, and conscience. He highlights the need for a sound ethics, a culture and spirituality genuinely capable of settling limits and teaching clear-minded self-restraint. Without this, we are at grave risk, lacking the means to control our ever-increasing power, and technology tends to dominate both nature and our human nature, seeing nature as raw material to be hammered into useful shape. It also intensifies conformity, reflecting the patterns of machine production and compulsive consumerism. These challenges can only be addressed by community networks, and ecological conversion must also be a community conversion. Let us note also that Guardini's evocation of love for the world in its helplessness and vulnerability is echoed by Francis in a passage in his Evangelical Deum, the joy of the gospel. I quote, "An authentic faith which is never comfortable or completely personal always involves a deep desire to change the world, to transmit values, to leave this earth somehow better than we found it. We love this magnificent planet on which God has put us, and we love the human family which dwells here with all its tragedies and struggles, its hopes and aspirations, its strengths and weaknesses. The earth is our common home, and all of us are brothers and sisters." Section 2 of Chapter 3 of Laudato Si, entitled "The Globalization of the Technocratic Paradigm," argues that the deeper problem with technology is that humanity has taken up technology and its development according to an undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm. This paradigm exalts a subject rationally dominating an external object, which is open to manipulation. This objectification of nature makes it easy to accept the idea of infinite or unlimited growth based on the lie that there is an infinite supply of the world's goods. Many problems in today's world arise from using a scientific and technological epistemological perspective on human beings and society. While it could be argued that the products of peacetime technology can all be used for good or ill and are in themselves morally neutral, Laudato Si contends that technological products are not neutral, for they create a framework which ends up conditioning lifestyles and shaping social possibilities along the lines dictated by the interests of certain powerful groups. Decisions which may seem purely instrumental are in reality decisions about the kind of society we want to build. The technocratic paradigm also tends to dominate economic and political life. Finance overwhelms the real economy. Technological specialization makes it difficult to see the larger picture, since life gradually becomes a surrender to situations conditioned by technology, itself viewed as the principal key to the meaning of existence. In this light, ecological culture must not be just a series of urgent responses, but a lifestyle, a spirituality, generating resistance to the technocratic paradigm. We need to come to terms with the problem as a whole, not through piecemeal remedies. We do have the freedom needed to limit and direct technology, to put it at the service of another type of progress, one which is healthier, more human, more social, more integral. In the midst of technological culture, there is still an authentic humanity calling for a new synthesis. Will the promise last in spite of everything, with all that is authentic rising up in stubborn resistance? People no longer seem to believe in a happy future, and there is growing awareness that scientific and technological progress cannot be equated with the progress of humanity and history. Excuse me. All of this shows the urgent need for us to move forward in a bold cultural revolution. Citing Guardini, Francis argues that the technocratic paradigm sees nature merely as an object to be hammered into useful shape. Modernity has been marked by an excessive anthropocentrism, sometimes with the Promethean vision of a Promethean vision of mastery over the world. Yet a biblical sense of our dominion over the universe should be understood more properly in the sense of responsible stewardship. We need to recognize both the worth of nature and the worth of human beings, including the poor and unborn, avoiding attitudes which would neglect either. A misguided anthropocentrism need not necessarily yield to biocentrism. There can be no ecology without an adequate anthropology, which values every human person in their uniqueness, not simply as a product of chance or physical determinism. In Laudate Deum, published in October last year, about 8.5 years after Laudato Si, Francis writes that with the passage of time, I have realized that our responses have not been adequate, or the world in which we live is collapsing and may be nearing the breaking point. Referring to the technocratic paradigm, he cites the analysis that he made in Laudato Si and notes that, I quote, in recent years, we have been able to confirm this diagnosis, even as we have witnessed a new advance of the above paradigm. Artificial intelligence and the latest technological innovations start with the notion of a human being with no limits, whose abilities and possibilities can be infinitely expanded thanks to technology. In this way, the technocratic paradigm monstrously feeds upon itself, end quote. Even though the natural resources required by new technologies, such as lithium, silicon, and others, are not unlimited, the greater problem is the ideology underlying an obsession to increase human power beyond anything imaginable, before which non-human reality is a mere resource at its disposal. Everything that exists ceases to be a gift for which we should be thankful, esteem, and cherish, and instead becomes a slave, prey to any whim of the human mind and its capacities. The most recent expression of the technocratic paradigm was addressed in the Pope's message for the 57th World Day of Peace on January the 1st this year, entitled Artificial Intelligence and Peace. Considering the future of artificial intelligence between promise and risk, Francis reiterates a key point of Laudato Si. We need to remember that scientific research and technological innovations are not disembodied and neutral, but subject to cultural influences. As fully human activities, the directions they take reflect choices conditioned by personal, social, and cultural values in any given age. Because of this, forms of artificial intelligence should always be regarded as socio-technical systems. For the impact of any artificial intelligence device, regardless of its underlying technology, depends not only on its technical design, but also on the aims and interests of its owners and developers, and on the situations in which will be employed. Speaking of the sense of limit in the technocratic paradigm, this should lead us to reflect on something frequently overlooked in our current technocratic and efficiency-oriented mentality, as it is decisive for personal and social development: the sense of limit. Human beings are by definition mortal. By proposing to overcome every limit through technology, in an obsessive desire to control everything, we risk losing control over ourselves. In the quest for an absolute freedom, we risk falling into the spiral of a technological dictatorship. Recognizing and accepting our limits as creatures is an indispensable condition for reaching, or better, welcoming fulfillment as a gift. In the ideological context of a technocratic paradigm, inspired by a Promethean presumption of self-sufficiency, inequalities could grow out of proportion, knowledge and wealth accumulate in the hands of a few, and grave risks ensue for democratic societies and peaceful coexistence. End quote. These risks may well include forms of bias and discrimination, which intrude when individuals' rights and entitlements are assessed by artificial intelligence, which lack different levels of mediation and can easily lead to systemic errors. For example, in relation to the right to receive political asylum or social assistance. A glaring example of this is the recent robo-debt scandal in Australia. Francis's response to the challenge posed by the technocratic paradigm are principally set out in chapters 5 and 6 of Laudato Si. Chapter 5, Lines of Approach and Action, includes reflection on religions in dialogue with sciences. Here, Francis emphasizes religion as an ethical resource, especially the role of classic religious texts, taking up a theme he had developed earlier in The Joy of the Gospel. He emphasizes that technical solutions will be powerless without a spiritual and moral compass, exhorting believers to learn from the treasures of wisdom which we have been called to protect and preserve. This learning needs to include dialogue between religions, between the different sciences, and also between the different ecological movements, which have their own ideological conflicts. Chapter 6, Ecological Education and Spirituality, offers principles and perspectives in theology and spirituality as a basis for an integral ecology that can situate technology within an attitude of grateful receptivity to creation and care for the earth. Freedom in our age, in affluent societies, is often reduced to compulsive consumerism, with a lack of deeper self-awareness and identity. And the current global situation engenders a feeling of instability and uncertainty, increasing selfishness and self-enclosure. Yet human beings are capable of rising above all this and making a new start. No system can completely suppress our openness to what is good, true, and beautiful, or our God-given ability to respond to his grace at work deep in our hearts. Our present situation calls for ecological conversion, and the heritage of Christian spirituality offers rich resources for this. This must include profound interior conversion, since living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. The example of St Francis of Assisi can inspire to conversion, which must be communal as well as individual. The assurances of Christian faith inform this conversion, including the security that Christ has taken unto himself this material world, and now risen, is intimately present to each being, as well as the conviction that God created this world and that each creature reflects something of God and has a message to convey to us. Christian spirituality also proposes an alternative understanding of the quality of life, a prophetic and contemplative lifestyle, one capable of deep enjoyment free of the obsession with consumption. This inner peace is closely related to care for ecology and the common good. Together with other spiritual paths, Christian faith offers a mystical and sacramental perspective on creation, which can remedy the technocratic drive to reduce creation to inert, malleable nature. Citing the Sufi writer Ali al-Khawass, St Bonaventure, and St John of the Cross, Francis notes the richly poetic ways in which mystics have conveyed their awareness that the universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. The sacraments, most of all the Eucharist, are a privileged way in which nature is taken up by God to become a means of mediating supernatural life. The centrality of the Eucharist is linked to Sunday, the day of rest, centered on the Eucharist, which sheds its light on the whole week and motivates us to greater concern for nature and the poor. God the Creator is Trinity, a community of subsistent relations, and so the created world is a web of relationships. Everything is interconnected, and this invites us to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity. Pope Francis has drawn very effectively on the pioneering work of Romano Guardini to develop a powerful critique of the technocratic paradigm. Many more recent ecological thinkers have also contributed to the field of ideas from which Laudato Si has drawn. Francis has demonstrated his concern for this urgent challenge to humanity by returning to it recently in Laudate Deum and at the beginning of this year in his World Day of Peace statement on artificial intelligence and peace. Responding to this challenge, he has highlighted the ways in which Christian faith and spirituality can envision the world in an alternative way, as creation to be cherished and cared for. While criticizing the technocratic paradigm, he applauds the process in human welfare that science and technology have made possible. In his article, The Destiny of Creation, Theological Ethical Reflections on Laudato Si, William Schweiker commends the alternative vision the encyclical offers and provides a careful analysis of the technocratic paradigm and the ways in which it is countered by an ecological perspective drawn from Christian faith. His concern, however, is whether the dissemination and acceptance of this alternative vision is too dependent on a specific religious tradition. I quote, "Yet one can surely ask, how are human beings to know this universal destiny in order to assume their responsibility other than by the promise of the biblical witness and Catholic teaching? Is there a sense that its teaching is only open to a spiritual elite? The issue here is the coherence of the spirituality in the encyclical and its political and economic conception of governance. Is there a rupture between a theology that backs the dignity of each person, that usually funds democratic governance, and the spirituality that can tend towards elites?" End quote. Schweiker's concern raises a question that is relevant to any specifically religious response to the ethical challenges that face pluralist societies. If this response draws on a specific religious tradition, how can it be intelligible to or motivate those who do not share in that tradition? A detailed response to that question is beyond the scope of this paper. Suffice it to note that Francis has repeatedly emphasized the ways in which the vision he commends is also supported and enriched by other faiths and philosophies. Both in Laudato Si and in Evangelical Gaudium, the Joy of the Gospel, he has spoken of religious classics as resources to be shared with humanity. I have noted in this paper how he draws on both Christian and Sufi mysticism, and his collaboration with Muslim leaders in ethical projects is well known. In her Pope Francis's Integral Ecology Paradigm, an exploration of its theological foundations and ethical implications, Celia Dean Drummond writes that Pope Francis's theological vision for a renewed anthropology is a radical and mirror image of the technological paradigm that he argues has gripped the imagination of contemporary societies with associated negative consequences. She notes that a number of contributors to this debate have interpreted Laudato Si's call for an integral ecology to be an extension and complement to Pope Paul VI's concept of integral humanism in his 1967 encyclical Populorum Progressio. She emphasizes, however, that, I quote, "My own perspective is that this understanding of integral ecology is certainly true, but is not sufficiently all-embracing. It is just rather one, albeit a crucial dimension, in the complexity of what the term signifies and intends." Pope Francis is doing far more than simply building on previous encyclicals and ideas. He is asking for a radical cultural revolution, end quote. I will conclude this paper with a question emerging from what she writes here. Papal documents on ecological matters have often been seen as a part of and continuous with Catholic social teaching, that the call to save the earth is also a call to save the poor, and therefore not a radically new departure. Is the call for an integral ecology to respect creation and dethrone the technocratic paradigm a new call in response to a new threat, or should it rather be seen as essentially continuous with the teaching tradition that began with Pope Leo XIII's 1891 exhortation Rerum Novarum on the condition of the working classes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. What a beautiful presentation. So insightful. I think Guardini can be seen as a precursor. Indeed, he was older than Tolkien and Lewis, C.S. Lewis, whose views we have come across in previous seminars. We're also very critical about the technocratic civilization, modern civilization, especially the idea of power as the primary goal of technological advancement. It's interesting that power is not by definition evil in Guardini, at least not when it's paired with responsibility and self-control, which is that ascetic dimension which is so prominent in Pope Francis's recent encyclicals. And I loved Pope Francis's point about shifting from power used as a tool for forcing nature, including human nature, into usefulness, to care for nature, human and otherwise. And I believe that this is, regardless of how radical a revolution, it is a revolutionary thought that we are invited to think in global terms rather than either or. Now, let's hear from Anne, after which we'll take a short break. Anne, the floor is yours.
I think this is my correct. Yes. So thank you very much to Doru for inviting me to be a respondent. I'm not any expert in anything. My Columbian colleague, Noel Connolly, used to say, an expert is a spirit under pressure. So that's me at the moment. I just put up 3 photos here just to show you that I'm actually not an expert. First one shows that I was brought up in rural Victoria, very close to nature. The second one I'll explain a little bit later on. And the third one shows you where I'm at now, at my age and stage, enjoying doing land care and particularly sharing it with young children, connecting them. So I really enjoyed reading the paper. Thank you, Robert. I resonated so much with most of it, all of it, in fact, I would say. And I hadn't heard of Guardini except in Laudato Si and the reference there. And I found that very helpful for my continued reading of Laudato Si. I'll just pick up on a few things all the way through. I particularly want to pick up on Schweiker's concerns about the acceptance and dissemination of an alternative vision of Pope Francis is dependent on spiritual elite and a particular religion, that is Christianity amid ethical challenges in plural societies. And the question, how can it be intelligible and motivational to all? Thinking about it's now 9 years since Laudato Si. And also I want to pick up on your question towards the end of Celia Dean Drummond's critique or call for a renewed anthropology, and Laudato Si's call for an integral ecology is true, but not sufficiently all-embracing. It is much more radical. So I'll pick up on those points. And as I was reading through the the paper, I just wanted to emphasize that we are in the age of anthropocentrism. And I particularly wanted to highlight where I think we are now, and that is with populations concentrated in urban areas, the technology, we're disconnected from the natural world generally. And I'll refer to, say, Richard Louve's book, Last Child in the Woods, where he talks about nature deficit disorder as an actual symptom of well-being in today's societies generally. Climate change is one symptom of this disconnect from the natural world. And I think because it's affecting ecosystems, which are in turn affecting human people, and people are now starting to take notice. So we have this, particularly in our culture here in Australia and among young people, anxiety, eco-anxiety, which is identifiable by psychologists, and fear, a general culture of fear. But another symptom is biodiversity loss. And I want to point out that biodiversity loss is also affecting ecosystems, and it's affecting other human species, leading to extinctions. But I would argue that this is not affecting humans, people as much, because it doesn't seem to be affecting humans yet. People aren't realising it. The one-dimensional technology paradigm, I believe, is about human desire and also about power, but also about the military industrial economic systems which have arisen post-World War II. And Christian and other religions have all been part of this, particularly in the culture of colonisation and patriarchy. And I see Pope Francis is one global leader in addressing this reality. So for me, the technocratic paradigm poses the big question, what does it mean to be human in the 21st century in the reality of technology and where technology is heading? So Pope Francis invites us to become painfully aware of this reality, to dare to turn what is happening in the world into our own personal suffering, and thus to discover what each of us can do about it. And in Laudate Deum, he says, with the passage of time from when he wrote Laudato Si, I've realised that our responses have not been adequate, while the world in which we live is collapsing and may be nearing the breaking point. And many people feel that. The Stockholm Institute for Planetary Boundaries map very well that Earth is exceeding its boundaries for human existence. And you can look up that link there to see that mapped. So in Laudato Deum, he says, in recent years, we've been able to confirm this diagnosis. And I really find that last sentence, in this way, the technocratic paradigm monstrously feeds upon itself as very much a reality now. I'd like to go back to where it's 1990, Pope John Paul II very first talked about ecological conversion, and then Pope Benedict talked in 2007 about our Earth is talking to us and we must listen and decipher its message if we want to survive. And this idea of listening to Earth is something that I very much want to emphasise, is where I'm coming from, and want to use in my response to Robert. And I pick up on in Mark's Gospel, let anyone with ears to hear, listen. Listening to Earth. When I speak about this, Earth is speaking to us. Most people can understand that kind of concept. And especially if we listen to Dr. Miriam Rose Ungemer-Bowman's Dadiri, and the wisdom we can learn from our First Nations peoples. To breathe with me is to listen deeply. To listen deeply is to connect to the sound of deep calling to deep. The deep inner spring inside us, we call on it and it calls on us. And this is an invitation to that wisdom that Robert referred to. And this quotation is from Andrew Skeoch, who's a nature sound recordist. When he was taken out bush by an Aboriginal elder, and he said Andrew wanted to listen to the bush. And the Aboriginal elder said back, this is not for you to tune into the bush. It's for the bush to tune into you, to see what kind of fella you are, whether or not you can be trusted. If you are, the bush will start revealing itself, start talking to you. It'll tell you things. And I think this is the technological paradigm is, and the history of our colonization and our disconnect from the earth. We've forgotten how to listen in the natural world. And I like Pope Francis's Laudato Si. This great cultural, spiritual, and educational challenge lies before us. So he emphasizes that with our faith traditions, our Christian tradition, science and religion can enter into intense dialogue, which is fruitful for both, with their distinctive approaches. And he talks about, it emphasizes for me, a true ecology in face of these issues. Religion and religious language can be part of the motivation and of the discourse. So it's time to bring back science and religion together. So in Laudato Si, this encyclical welcomes dialogue with everyone so that together we can seek paths of liberation. And that's where I bring back my little photo, which was from an experience in Ireland with led by Sean McDonough, who's been a great influence on me, and also another scientist, John Feehan from Ireland. And I like this quotation from Paul Tournier from the Psychological Sciences Uni of Melbourne. So bringing in that non-religious voice, if you like, him saying we need a spiritual voice to be once again heard in the marketplace, not a strident dogmatic voice, but one of humility and faithfulness that encompasses compassion linked to justice, a voice of integrity linked to an ability to communicate in a technological age, a voice of love that is not faked. The natural world must no longer be dominated by the greed of humans. There can be no lasting peace without a much deeper understanding and respect between religions. So here I'm bringing in this opening up to all religions. Coming back to Christians, in this 21st century, we understand now the human story within the cosmic story, and we're opening to the unfolding of the mystery of the universe. We're learning so much more about Earth's story, especially with the James Webb Telescope, revealing more to us now about our cosmic beginnings as Earthlings. So we need to know the new story of creation. We need to, I think, open up our minds and our hearts to the big God. I kind of use my own language to talk about letting God out of the boxes we've all put God in. And I think in the Christian world, be open to the cosmic Christ. And I like reading the word of, thinking of the word of God in John 1:1, and again in 1:14 and in 10:10. I think the understanding of the cosmic story, as Pope Francis highlights there, is that our God is Trinitarian and relational. And therefore, the meaning of the incarnation is crucial to keep promoting, and the idea of death, resurrection as part of that evolutionary story, that God is in the world and everything is interconnected and interdependent, and therefore our gifts of sacrament and Eucharist are something really significant to share. In looking at science and other faiths, just thinking about this, I think that's where there's a huge potential for opening up to the big God. I find in the work that I'm involved in, that dialogue with science, because I'm not a scientist, and the dialogue with other faith traditions has really expanded my image of God and my relationship with God. And this is an example of where the two are coming together. At the Stockholm Institute, they've produced, and the Vatican Integral Ecology unit attached to the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, have produced a new practical guide, which you can look at in the link there, which integrates science with messages from Pope Francis. So that's wonderful development. It comes from the Stockholm Institute. And also just this year in February, the Muslim leaders have produced Al-Mizan, Covenant for the Earth, which is seen to be a Muslim equivalent of Laudato Si. So Pope Francis is calling us for then to integrate this, to be integral ecologists. What does this mean? He's calling for us to heal the earth. It means for us to be scientifically literate, ethically grounded, spiritually alive, and motivated to act. And you can see that in this diagram here. We need this for all people, young students who are maybe disconnected from traditional faith, adult learners, and citizens in our communities. So one of the works that I've been involved in ever since I've been part of the Columban Mission Institute, and since its closure in 2017, is the Faith Ecology Network. It began in 2003, and with the express aim of bringing together that dialogue across the faith traditions with the sciences and faiths. It's a network of people, of faith traditions and none. And it's about ecological awareness and care. But since 2020, we've had a focus on the wonder of biodiversity, recognising that we're undergoing biodiversity collapse, the sixth great mass extinction. Also that the Global United Nations Network has developed a post-2020 framework on trying to prevent that collapse, however limited that work is, and also the call of our First Nations people to heal country. So FEN, as we call ourselves, calls on faith groups to better learn from and care for biodiversity. In this attempt to reconnect to nature, things have to change, and it's we who must change. Our various faith traditions and the sciences do have something in common. We listen and learn from each other. We share a sense of wonder and awe. We've developed a framework for communities we call 10 Ways to Care, in which we're using this process, which is an adaptation of Catholic social teaching process of See, Judge, Act, which can apply across all communities, all groups. We call it listen and learn, listen to the earth, listen to the sciences, listen to the wisdom of the elders, and learn, reflect on that, contemplate, use the wisdom of our faith traditions, and then take action and keep repeating that cycle. So if you can see it, we have a colour poster chart that goes with each of those 10 ways. Another aspect I want to highlight in what Robert has brought forward about community involvement and communities working together. From Laudato Si, there's global Laudato Si action plans being called on across all Catholic communities, but all communities in a sense. But in our parish where I belong, which is Francis Forest Parish, at our church at St Anthony in Fields, Terry Hills, because we've got a creek running across the property, because we've got land, we've developed a land care group, and you can see some of the work we've been doing there. We have strong connections with Aboriginal community where we have Singing Up Country music event every year. We listen to ecologists. That's an ecologist there advising us on a management plan for our place. You can see some of the work we're doing and listening to Aboriginal elders, the wisdom of those people. So when it all boils down, we're all earthlings. It's where we live. It's how we've evolved. I can't see us into the future disconnecting from Earth totally. We know we need ecological conversion. Pope John Paul II first called for that in 1990. But we seem to be lacking the heart for that conversion. The official churches in Australia, not just the Catholic churches, but other Christian churches, are slow in this ecological conversion and reluctant to change. We can grow into a prophetic and contemplative lifestyle. And this is closely related to care for ecology and the common good. Others say that just ecological conversion is not going to get us out of this, and say to prepare for disasters. For example, teaching permaculture, growing community. In the Bathurst Diocese, they're doing this. In New South Wales, the Uniting Church Forest Alliance is doing it with pastoral care for forest activists. Others are reading the signs, listening to nature and regenerating land, such as Charles Massey and regenerative agriculture, along with many others. Others are doing formation of leaders for the Mercy Institute Integral Ecology Emerging Leaders Program. They're training up leaders to go out there and do networking and work in their communities. Others connecting with young people, for example, the Unplug and Play project, where they get Gen Zers off their games and immersed in land care projects. These are just some of the people that have inspired me over the years. First of all, Sean McDonough, whose work I can see also in Laudato Si. Cyril Halley, Brian Gore, Charles Rue, Vinnie Bush, Michael Gormy, John Layden, all of these people have been doing this work for 40 years or so. I'm very also interested in the work of Thomas Berry and particularly Brian Swim in Cosmogenesis and the New Sphere, in the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology and the work of Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm across other faith traditions. The Tired Project with John Hort, Elizabeth Johnson, Elia Delio and others. John Fian and Example, a Meditation on Forests, he's an Irishman, and Dr. Anne Paulina, a First Nations person from Broome area. Summing up, we have to face the reality, reduce the violence against nature, see things from where they are, not where we are, think about interconnectedness and interdependence with compassion and hope. rediscover our proper place, our responsibilities for care. There is no endless growth. Earth has limits. Technology is a tool to be used wisely. It is not God. Come to grips with consumerism and overconsumption. Improve social equity and equality of income. Learn a new theology of universal communion in God. All life is interconnected, interdependent, and regenerative. What we do in one area impacts another. Learn that we're part of an evolving universe, part of a sublime communion, a universal family. Develop wonder and awe. Realise the world is not just for us humans, and that natural systems are not just services for our use. And remember, we're all in this together, human and other than human. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. What a tour de force. I love the mirror images of deep listening to nature via the dairy and also the need to shut up and allow the bush to listen to us. I do believe that this kind of interactivity is of the essence for self-regeneration and the regeneration of our culture, of our society. You led us from the heights of theory to the roots of well, the grassroots of activity, and I'm very grateful. I think it's a beautiful way of echoing the outline of Guardini and Pope Francis's wisdom in Robert's paper, by way of showing what actually happens on the ground. So thank you, and thank you both. Let's see if we can get some interaction going. Let's begin with Robert and Anne. Is there anything else you'd like to tell each other, or shall we go to questions?
Well, just to quickly say, express my appreciation for Anne's presentation. As I just said to her as we were chatting, I don't have any considerable experience of the ecological movement. Sorry, I'll just put it back to gallery. Doesn't seem to, not to worry. Which Anne obviously does have. So I appreciated very much her exposition and opening up for us some of the different aspects of her work and experience. I mean, I've come to this question, I suppose, especially because of Guardini's insights already in the 1950s about the ways in which technology is, as he says, bringing us to the end, a decision about the meaning and purpose of our intelligence in relation to planet Earth, exacerbated obviously by the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb. So I've come from that direction, and rather than specifically the ecological direction. So just to say that much at this stage.
And I think that in your response there, that sense of anxiety and fear that's hovering in the community now, with the state of the planet, because of climate crises and biodiversity loss, and the many ecological crises. A lot of people can see that now. And I think that reconnection with nature is a way of dealing with that fear. The Melbourne Uni did a research project last year in which some of us from the Faith Ecology Network were involved in this, the reality of eco-anxiety that many, especially young people, are feeling. Being in the natural world is helping them address that. And so there were several different faith traditions, and environmental groups and First Nations people involved in this research, where they modelled the actual physical engaging with nature as a way of dealing with the anxiety and fear.
Thank you.
That's so interesting. You know, I recently read an article by Lisa Sedaris, whom we had as a speaker a while ago, and also a conversation she was involved in, and it's published about the need to balance a bit our awe towards or wonder at science and technology and the world we have erected, and awe at nature, or wonder at nature itself, which is what I assume many younger generations have lost track of. They cannot discern a blade of grass from a rabbit or something, and it's so important, yeah, to reconnect with nature without perhaps abandoning the course of scientific inquiry and technological advancement. But let's take some comments or questions from the floor. Is anyone interested in Neil, please?
Hi, Daru. Look, just the comment that he had one of the people you quoted towards the end wondered whether it was a very Christian perspective. And I know we had a conference in Rome on Laudato Si not long after it came out. One of the speakers was a Jesuit who worked in India, and he said it resonated completely with the Hindu population there. And I think they have a much more cosmological as opposed to an anthropological worldview. And they found lots of points of resonance, which I think is encouraging. It also points in the direction of how we have to move away from that, which is from the technocratic thing, which is listening to Indigenous populations, whose worldview is much more connected to the cosmological patterns of the world, of nature, and the rhythms of nature and the mind. And as Anne was saying, we have to have that deep listening to the world and deep listening to those who are the most marginalised, which are Indigenous populations across the globe. Anyway, that's my comment.
Yes, thank you, Neil. I mean, I think William Schweiker is a very good theological ethicist, but I do think what the Pope's saying in Laudato Si does have a lot of resonance, as you say, giving the example of Hinduism, indigenous religions. I don't see a danger of it becoming just something for a spiritual elite.
And I find with my involvement with FEN and ARC and other interfaith dialogues around ecology, having that common interest and common concern can bring out really core beliefs and principles in each of the faith traditions, which gives us that common ground for dialogue, as Pope Francis points out in Laudato Si. And I think that the common concern is when that anxiety and the fear affects the most people, I think we'll get the most benefit out of the dialogue. We'll find people wanting to come together, not out of conflicts like in Gaza and so on, which is important, but when we have something that we really, really care about and want the good from it, I think that it's a sign of hope for me.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. You know, you both highlighted this breadth of perspective pertaining to the message of the Pope and his sources. And I think this is a crucial time in our history. You know, time is running out, actually, literally, not only figuratively. And perhaps that big God of yours, Anne, I love that that phrase, that big God, you know, which welcomes who can welcome many more children than what we thought God would and could, is something to ponder, not only theologically, but from the viewpoint of applicability, how we can transform this kind of worldview, this perception of things into a way of life and a way of doing things. But there's something that you mentioned, you actually both mentioned, and it has to do with the clock running out. Are we too late? We aren't. Okay, so give me reasons to hope.
Well,
Go, Robert.
I suppose that a comment I want to make, if I may answer my own question pertaining to what Celia Dean Drummond said, is this essentially in continuity with the social teaching or something radically, well, largely new? And I think she's right. I say that with a bit of hesitation because my own work and involvement has been very much in the socio-political area. But I think she's right that this is calling for a cultural revolution pertaining to our whole attitude to the relationship between our ingenuity and our wisdom and planet Earth and nature. So it's not only about justice in our society, but our whole relationship to planet Earth itself. And I find it very striking how both Guardini and Pope Francis spoke about our love and care for our vulnerable planet Earth.
Could I just put a counter voice to that, Robert? It's been something I've commented in a number of different places and articles that I've written. If you have a theory of cultural change, well, of change, you have cultural change and you have social and institutional change. Cultural change takes a long time. Like, it's just not on the time scale that we have. Putting all your eggs into the cultural change basket will not do what needs to be done on the time scale that it has to happen. It really has to be political, economic action. So political activism is going to have to take the lead on this, because this is the only thing that can bring about the changes that need to be made on the time scale in which they need to be made. Eventually, they will need to be supported by a cultural shift that helps make sense of all that. But a serious cultural change that would make a difference might take a century. And we ain't got a century.
Yes, I agree with you, Neil.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, I'm trying to agree with that as well. But
Yeah.
what I was, I suppose, accepting is Celia Dean Drummond's argument that Laudato Si is not essentially a continuation of socio-political, but something new. Yes, I agree with you, Neil, that given the urgency of the situation, political change is...
I mean, in Laudate Si, Pope Francis is scathing about our political and economic institutions, absolutely scathing. And the same in Laudate Deum, that the real failures have been institutional failures, and we need to call them to account.
I'm wondering, Neil, this has been a question of mine, in all the accountability involved in emissions and so on, where is the military made accountable. The impact of the military.
Don't know.
So they're not measured. And the whole fear that's ramping up now is part of that whole industrial, military, economic complex. So, you know, we can see where the scientists can measure the Anthropocene really starting to have an impact after the 1950s with the post-World War II and the impact of the development of the industrial military complex there. And look at what's happening now, you know, the development of robotics in murdering people, you know, killing people. So I think that's another area that really needs to be highlighted politically, that link between the military and the economic system.
And what can be done, say, we are Christians belonging to various traditions, established churches, and so on. What could the churches do from this, let's say, more practical viewpoint? Because I know Anne's activity and Thea's activity, you know, Neil's wife, and so on and so forth. That makes a dent to the extent that we know of the emergency, and we become more and more aware of the emergency through the cost that you pay for the position you take in our society of zombies. But what could the churches do? What could theology do in terms of, you know, hastening a bit this process, political process, economic decision, and so on and so forth, that can sort of hopefully lead us in God's grace out of the danger and the mess we are in? What do you reckon could be done?
The Laudato Si action plans are one attempt, but as I mentioned, the churches that I see in the Catholic churches and also in many Protestant churches, there's only a very small number of people involved in actually taking that up. There's not leadership from the bishops in the Catholic churches. There's talk, but not a lot of action. Catholic Earth Care's making some inroads.
Yeah, it's the same with the Orthodox, as you know. Everyone speaks of the Green Patriarch, you know, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who's good friends with the Pope. He is a pusher, you know, but nothing happens on the ground. And I was talking some weeks ago with a Romanian friend who works in Austria, and he's interested in ecological and social justice aspects. By the way, he does now a postdoc at the Vatican, and he told me that it's unbelievable the level of insensitivity on the part of the ecclesiastical establishment, at least in the Orthodox Church. This is why my question, perhaps, you know, obsessive, is it too late?
The real action being undertaken is being done in secular society. Like where Thea has mapped my wife, for those who don't know, works in this area all the time. But the explosion of groups that are presently engaged in climate change action, for example, has just been phenomenal. So, you know, 15 years ago, there were a few. Now there's doctors for climate change, pediatricians for climate change, dentists for climate change. You know, there's just been an explosion in civil society. And I think a lot of people are channeling their energies through those groups where they find a response, where they're not finding a response in their church communities. Because the church communities are just not responding.
The churches resist a sort of ethical bifurcation, and they hold on to what Cardinal Bernardin called the seamless ethic of life. So They support the ecological movement as well as ethical issues to do with the beginning of life, end of life, and so on. And they resist the bifurcation that leads to familiar culture wars and so on. So that's sort of integrated ethical teaching by the churches, which accommodates and is at home with ecology. I think that's very important.
Okay, well, our time is up. Of course, we haven't sorted things out, and I'm still uncertain about that hope. But I'm really grateful to both Robert and Anne for their insightful perspectives they shared with us, also for the interaction we had here. And hopefully, even this humble means, the TRN ISCA seminars will reach out slowly to wake up people. So once again, thank you both, and thank you everyone who took part in this seminar. Many thanks, and in Darug Dijarigura Yana Janawi, which means thank you for walking with us. God willing, see you next time in May, our last seminar of this series. And until then, Godspeed.